The planet is doomed. Greenhouse gases are on the rise, polar ice caps are melting, and the ozone layer now affords as much protection as a sheet of cling film. But don't worry, I'm on the case. I've flown all the way to Sweden on a jumbo jet to test drive a brand new car. What? Unlike the old model, which never quite felt ready, this new car promises incredible fuel economy, low emissions, and a coolness factor previously unseen in hybrid cars. So has Toyota finally cracked it, or are they just cracking up? I want to take you through a brief history of the Toyota Prius. Behind me is the Generation 1 model, first released in Japan in 1997. Hard to believe, but this car actually developed 101 brake horsepower and developed 120 grams of CO2 per kilometer. Not very impressive, you might think. That's why they developed Generation 2. This model improved on things, actually emitting only 104 grams of CO2 per kilometer and developing 110 brake horsepower. However, the car behind me is what it's all about. This is the Generation 3 Prius. It's the car of the future today. On the surface, it looks as if they've gone bonkers. For a start, the Prius is actually quite good looking, and everyone knows eco-friendly cars are meant to be ugly. Next up, this new car is actually heavier than the old model by 70 kilos, but that's the equivalent of carrying a fully grown man with you everywhere you go. As if adding more weight wasn't stupid enough, they've gone and installed a bigger engine. The old model had a 1.5-litre unit, but this thing gets a 1.8-litre. Now, I'm no car scientist, but it doesn't take a genius to know that by adding a bigger engine, you get a heavier car, fewer miles per gallon, and more environmental filth. What were they thinking? Why is it so heavy? Well, because it's loaded to the gills with technology. Down here is the control area, which includes this Toyota head unit. Now, what we can do here is control the various settings of the car, as well as take advantage of the satellite navigation software and change the audio. So if we have a look on the left-hand side, we can see we can switch to AM and FM radio, plus also DAB. But more interestingly, there's CD, which you can actually rip to the car's internal 40-gig hard drive. To do that, I simply open up the face of the unit, which slides down like so. I insert my CD, close her up again, then hit the audio button down at the bottom right. And if I did have a CD in there, you'd hit the record button, the tracks would begin to rip onto the hard drive, and then I could begin to play them. Unfortunately, the system doesn't have the ability to record the track and album names from your CD. You have to do that manually. Another interesting addition to this car is Toyota's brand new touch tracer system. Now this, you might think is an ordinary steering wheel mounted button control device, but it goes a little bit further than that. On each side of the steering wheel we have two circular control pads, each with 5 buttons. Now the idea is as you're driving along, you want to control the various systems of the car. To do that, you simply move your fingers over the buttons and a corresponding display appears on the central meter cluster up here on the dashboard. It does work. You can see exactly where your fingers are on the buttons without actually looking at the buttons themselves and taking your eyes off the road. It allows the driver to control the most commonly used features of the car, including the trip computer, the internal temperature, as well as the volume. And we think it's a pretty good system. As well as that, the new Prius gets a head-up display, which shows vehicle speed and sat-nav directions. Priuses of the past have been accused of being somewhat gimmicky, and Toyota's done itself no favors with the new one. On the roof of this car, they've installed solar panels. Now, their job isn't to help drive the car. No, their job is simply to control the fans inside the car to help keep it cool in a hot car park. To use it, you simply hit the AC button on the key fob, and that will keep the car cool for anything up to 3 minutes before you set off. Now this means when you get back inside the car, you don't have to run the gas-guzzling air conditioning unit quite as much, and your pet dog might not be as barbecued. But solar panels cost money and add more weight. You seeing a trend here? Now, the obvious thing to say at this point is that Toyota's lost its corporate mind, that the new Prius is a complete dog. But somehow, against all odds, the new Prius has become a stunning piece of machinery. That big old 1.8-litre engine is actually a blessing in disguise. Unlike the petrol-guzzling lump we see in most cars, it uses the Atkinson cycle, a method of combustion designed to deliver better fuel economy at the expense of performance. When you combine that with a newly engineered hybrid powertrain that delivers just 89 grams per kilometre of carbon dioxide, you can start to understand why the extra weight isn't really an issue. The new Prius has 3 separate driving modes, the most fun of which is power. To activate that, I hit the power mode button to the far right on this little center console, and that unleashes the car's full performance potential. 0 to 60 happens in 10.4 seconds, and we have a top speed of 112 miles per hour. It doesn't feel as if it's actually hindered by the fact that we're using an electric motor as well as a petrol one. Acceleration is quite quick, I can overtake safely, and it's actually quite a fun experience. The one criticism I do have is the fact that there's actually quite a lot of road noise. It's not quite as refined as some other cars in its class. The second driving mode, and the one you'll spend most time using, is Eco. Activate this by hitting the Eco mode button. Now this scales back the throttle response and also gives you slightly less power to the air conditioning unit, meaning you use less petrol. In this mode, you're encouraged to use the hybrid system indicator, a graph on the dashboard and in your head-up display, which shows exactly what the vehicle's doing at any given time. When you're cruising down a hill or applying the brake, that graph lives in the charge section, and that means the batteries are being recharged. When you accelerate again and the graph is in the left-hand side of the Eco section, it means the car's being driven only by the electric motors. Apply a little bit more throttle and the graph will no doubt go into the right-hand side of the Eco section, and that means both the electric motor and the petrol engine are working together in unison. When you accelerate hard, then we go into the power quadrant, and that means both the electric motor and the petrol engine are working together quite furiously to deliver more power. The third driving mode is electric vehicle, activated by hitting the EV button. As long as there's sufficient charge in the battery, it's possible to drive the new Prius for up to 2 kilometers purely on electric power. It means you can drive to the shops or complete a short school run without emitting any pollution or without using a single drop of petrol. On balance, it's easy to see why the new Prius is a worthwhile purchase. It's economical, it's green, and it will even save you money in the long run. The fact it emits less than 100 grams per kilometre of CO2 means it's exempt from road tax and exempt from the London congestion charge. And more importantly perhaps, is the fact it doesn't feel like some kind of botched together prototype. Toyota's not cracking up, they've cracked it. Unlike the previous Prius, this new generation model is a car first and an eco-warrior second. It might not save the planet, but with you behind the wheel, views like this might not become a thing of the past.